Hey guys, this is the first of many videos that we'll be making and sharing as the weeks go on. As most of y'all know that the governor has shut schools down until April 20th, so until that time, this is going to be our new normal. So just kind of throwing that out there. The more that you tune in and you listen to the reading and the conversation, one-sided conversation that I'm having, it will help you with the tests that are to follow. And so keep that in mind, that this is not just busy work, that this is work that will take us through so that when we are ready to come back, we've really and truly not missed important skills that you are going to need entering 7th grade. So these are still important lessons to kind of follow through with and to do. The noise that you're hearing in the background is the dishwasher. We are set up in my kitchen, so if you hear unusual sounds, it's just regular household sounds. At the day 2 lesson, which is tomorrow, I'll be talking with you all a little bit more about which questions that you'll need to answer that go along with this lesson. So if you haven't already done so, you're going to need your Giver book, and you're also going to need, which is this, and you're also going to need your Team Talk and a pencil. So I'm going to give you just a second to kind of gather those things together if you've not already done so. So if you don't mind, gather your stuff together. All right, so I'm going to assume that you've got it, and if not, you can rewind. That's the beauty of this kind of lesson. So kind of want to start this lesson like any other lesson we would do in class, and that's my goal ultimately, is to make this as seamless as I can, to make it as much of a classroom environment as we can. So our end in mind this week is I will be able to draw conclusions about information presented in the story. So we've been drawing conclusions, I know, since 5th grade, since I was your teacher in 5th grade, as well as I know that takes place in 4th grade. I'm not sure about 3rd grade, I'm assuming so, but 4th, 5th, and 6th for sure. So drawing conclusions is where you are making a guess and then you have evidence to back it up, whether it be textual evidence or whether it be background knowledge that leads you to the conclusion that you are coming up with. So while you've got your pencil, I would like you on your Team Talk, I want you to write down the end in mind, because you'll be answering questions without the end in mind in front of you, so I kind of want you to have it. So I will be able, gotta write it, I will be able to draw conclusions about information presented in the story. So we're going to keep referring back to that as we move on with our lesson, and so now you've got it in front of you to kind of refer back to as well. Our vocabulary this week is we have supplementary, and supplementary means you have additional. So I always think about supplementary time. If you're taking a test and you need additional time, that means you need supplementary time. You are requiring more than the average amount. Adequately is enough. I feel that these video lessons are going to be adequately done. They're going to be enough. Is it the same as being in a classroom environment? By no means, no. We don't have the team talks as team. We don't have the social interaction that we normally would have. So it is an adequately done lesson. Affectionately is where it's done compassionately. It's more than just, oh, good job. It's that hug and I'm so proud of you moment that shows that affection. Bewildered is confused. My husband would say, I live in bewildered land because I'm often confused or I need a moment to process. So bewildered is where you're not really sure about what's going on and you might need a little bit more information to not be confused. Nondescript means regular or normal. So there's nothing about it that stands out. So let's say you witness a bank robbery and the police officers are asking you to give a description of the robber and you really can't think of anything that stands out about the person. Their average height, they have average hair, they have an average look. So they are nondescript, which means they just seem regular or normal. Now, if this same situation's taking place and the bank robber has a bright pink mohawk and has a total face tattoo, then they would no longer be considered nondescript. It'd be very easy to describe that person because they do not look normal in southeastern Kentucky. That would really stand out. Contribute is to add to or to give something. Summoned is called forth. So let's say that we're all pretty much on lockdown at home right now and your parents hear this horrible crash in another room. Well, they're either going to do one of two things. They're going to jump up to see what it was, or if they knew you were in the room, you are going to be summoned to them to tell them what took place. So you may hear this big, Kim, what was that? Get in here. For them, they're summoning you to come and explain what just took place. Progressed is moved forward. And so as we are going through our lessons for this week 1 of this book, these are the words that we're going to keep rotating back around to. But I want us to think about this end in mind about drawing conclusions. So I want you to think or imagine that you see a person, either a guy or a lady, standing outside a building, and they have grease-colored hands. They've got on overalls or coveralls, and they're holding a wrench in their hands. What type of job would you automatically think that they had? And I'm sure that most of you kind of thought a mechanic. And that's true. So you are drawing a conclusion based on the information that I put forth to you that this person is a mechanic. Our evidence would be they have a wrench in their hand, they have oily hands, they've got on coveralls or overalls, and those are things that when we connect all those dots, that make us believe that they are a mechanic. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about before we actually get into our reading is the type of book that The Giver is. The Giver is a piece of science fiction, and it's probably one of my favorite types of books to read right now. I'm really into science fiction. A lot of times when we think of science fiction books, we think of Star Wars, we think of War of the World, we think of Lord of the Rings, but that's not necessarily the type of science fiction that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the type of science fiction that has futuristic settings more than anything. And that's what The Giver is giving us. It's giving us an alternate setting. It's sort of like The Hunger Games has that whole different setting with getting tributes and fighting this crazy kind of war to get a winner. So when I think about The Giver, it's got that same type of futuristic feel. Now, are we going to have a battle to the death in this particular book? No. But there are some pretty interesting twists and turns. Our author is Lois Lowry, and she has a whole series of these books that have this futuristic type of setting. So if you find yourself enjoying The Giver, it would be a really good idea for you to get an Audible book, or you can download the book. I'm all about holding the book, and so you might be interested in looking at a few more pieces of hers. So what I'd like us to do at this point is I'd like us to go ahead and go to chapter 1. And it would be page 1, but it is chapter 1. If you don't mind, I think I'll have a seat. While you kind of get twisted and situated, I'm going to get my team talk out. Alright, so remember, as we go along, just like we do in class, there'll be moments or times where I stop. And there'll be a question to think about. And since our end in mind is all about drawing conclusions, so we know that our question is going to have to do with something about that. One of the things about The Giver is that the readings do seem long. There's multiple pages that go with each lesson. So I would suggest you grab your book, you get comfortable, because I'm sure most of you are downloading this or looking at this on a phone or a laptop or a Chromebook. Make yourself comfortable. Here we go. It was almost December, and Jonas was beginning to be frightened. No, wrong word, Jonas thought. Frightened meant that deep, sickening feeling of something terrible about to happen. Frightened was the way he had felt a year ago when an unidentified aircraft had overflown the community twice. He had seen it both times. Squinting toward the sky, he had seen the sleek jet, almost a blur at its high speed, go past, and a second later heard the blast of sound that followed. Then, one more time, a moment later, from the opposite direction, the same plane. At first, he had been only fascinated. He had never seen aircraft so close, for it was against the rules for planes to fly over the community. Occasionally, when supplies were delivered by cargo planes to the landing field across the river, the children rode their bicycles to the riverbank and watched, intrigued, the unloading and then the takeoff directed to the west, always away from the community. But the aircraft a year ago had been different. It was not a squat, fat-bellied cargo plane, but a needle-nosed, single-pilot jet. And Jonas looked around anxiously and had seen others, adults as well as children, stop what they were doing and wait, confused, for an explanation of the frightening event. Then all of the citizens had been ordered to go into the nearest building and stay there immediately. The rasping voice through the speakers had said, "Leave your bicycles where they are." Instantly, obediently, Jonas had dropped his bike on its side on the path behind his family dwelling. He had run indoors and stayed there, alone. His parents were both at work, and his little sister Lily was at the child care center where she spent her after-school hours. Looking through the front window, he had seen no people. None of the busy afternoon crew or street cleaners, landscape workers, and food delivery people who usually populated the community at that time of day. He saw only the abandoned bikes here and there on their sides. An upturned wheel on one was still revolving slowly. He had been frightened then. The sense of his own community silent, waiting, had made his stomach churn. He had trembled. But it had been nothing. Within minutes, the speaker had crackled again, and the voice, reassuring now and less urgent, had explained that a pilot in training had misread his navigational instruments and made a wrong turn. Desperately, the pilot had been trying to make his way back when his error was noticed. "Needless to say, he will be released," the voice had said, followed by silence. There was an ironic tone to that final message, as if the speaker found it amusing. And Jonas had smiled a little, though he knew what a grim statement it had been. For a contributing citizen to be released from the community was a final decision, a terrible punishment, an overwhelming statement of failure. Even the children were scolded if they used the term lightly at play, jeering at a teammate who missed a catch or stumbled in a race. Jonas had done it once, had shouted at his best friend, "That's it, Asher, you're released," when Asher's clumsy error had lost a match for his team. He had been taken aside for a brief and serious talk by the coach, had hung his head with guilt and embarrassment, and apologized to Asher after the game. Now, thinking about the feeling of fear as he pedaled home along the river path, he remembered that moment of palpable, stomach-sinking terror when the aircraft had streaked above. It was not what he was feeling now with December approaching, and he searched for the right word to describe his own feeling. Jonas was careful about language, not like his friend Asher, who talked too fast and mixed things up, scrambling words and phrases until they were barely recognizable and often very funny. But Jonas grinned, remembering the morning that Asher had dashed into the classroom, late as usual, arriving breathlessly in the middle of the chanting of the morning anthem. When the class took their seats at the conclusion of the patriotic hymn, Asher remained standing to make his public apology as was required. I apologize for inconveniencing my learning community." Asher ran through the standard apology phrase rapidly, still catching his breath. The instructor in class waited patiently for his explanation. The students had all been grinning because they had listened to Asher's explanation so many times before. "I left home at the correct time, but when I was riding along to the hatchery, the crew was separating some salmon. I guess I just got distraught watching them. I apologize to my classmates," Asher concluded. He smoothed his rumpled tunic and sat down. "Well, we accept your apology, Asher," the class recited the standard response in unison. Many of the students were biting their lips to keep from laughing. "I accept your apology, Asher," the instructor said. He was smiling. "And I thank you because once again you have provided an opportunity for a lesson in language. Distraught is too strong an adjective to describe salmon viewing." And he turned and wrote distraught on the instructional board, and beside it he wrote, distracted. Jonas, nearing his home now, smiled at the recollection, thinking still as he wheeled his bike into a narrow port beside the door. He realized that frightened was the wrong word to describe his feelings. Now that December was almost here, it was too strong an adjective. He had waited a long time for this special December, and now that it was almost upon him, he wasn't frightened, but he was eager, he decided. He was eager for it to come, and he was excited, certainly. All of the 11s were excited about the event that would be coming so soon. But there was a little shudder of nervousness when he thought about it, about what might happen. Apprehensive, Jonas decided. That's what I am. "Well, who wants to be the first tonight for feelings?" Jonas's father asked at the conclusion of their evening meal. It was one of the rituals, the evening talk of feelings, and sometimes Jonas and his sister Lily argued over turns, over who would get to go first. Their parents, of course, were part of the rituals. They, too, told their feelings each evening, but Like all parents, all adults, they didn't fight and wheedle for their turns. Nor did Jonas tonight. His feelings were too complicated this evening. He wanted to share them, but he wasn't eager to begin the process of shifting through his own complicated emotions, even with the help that he knew his parents could give. "You go, Lily," he said, seeing his sister, who was much younger, only a 7, wiggling with impatience in her chair. "I felt very angry this afternoon," Lily announced. "My child care group was at the play area, and we had a visiting group of 7s, and they didn't obey the rules at all. One of them, a male, I don't know his name, kept going right to the front of the line for the slide, even though the rest of us were all waiting. I felt so angry at him, I made my hands into a fist like this." And she held up a clenched fist, and the rest of the family smiled at her small, defiant gesture. I'm going to stop there just a minute, and this question has nothing to do with our end in mind, which is about drawing conclusion. But I want you to think about what I read on page 6 to the top of page 7, and what is unusual about some of the statements that are made here. And what I mean about unusual, these are things that lead us to know that this is a piece of science fiction. So I want you to take just a moment. I want you to glance through 6 and 7 and come up with a couple of things that we don't do. That would be that realistic type of science fiction, and kind of what can you pull together? The part with the futuristic setting here that kind of stands out to me as odd is that the way Jonas explains that the family had every night that they shared their emotions. So what does it actually say? It says it was one of the rituals, the sharing of feelings. And so when I'm having dinner at the dinner table with my family, we might share something that happened that day. I may share something about my kids at school, or a coworker, or my kids will share something that they experienced that day. But it's not a mandatory thing. And the way this reads, it's as though everyone is required to share. So when I think about this as part of a futuristic setting, as part of that science fiction, that kind of jumps out to me. And another thing is, how did the little sister refer to the child on the playground? That's right, she referred to him as a male. Now, I would never say, "Hey, Andy," that's my husband, "do you see that little male child over there?" You know, I would say, "Do you see the little boy over there?" Or I might refer by his name. But the idea that she's referring to this kid as a male is another example of this futuristic setting. It's doing something that is abnormal to what we would do in today's setting or time. All right, let's go back in here. "Why do you think the visitors didn't obey the rules?" Mother asked. And Lily considered and shook her head. "I don't know. They acted like animals," Jonas suggested, and he laughed. "That's right," Lily said, laughing too. "Like animals." Well, neither children knew what the word meant exactly, but it was often used to describe someone uneducated or clumsy, someone who didn't fit in. "Where were the visitors from?" Father asked. And Lily frowned, trying to remember. Our leader told us when he made the welcome speech, but I can't remember. I guess I wasn't paying attention. It was from another community, and they had to leave very early, and they had their midday meal on the bus." And Mother nodded. Do you think it's possible that their rules may be different? And so they simply didn't know what your play area rules were. And Lily shrugged and nodded. I suppose. Well, you've visited other communities, haven't you, Jonas asked. My group has often. And Lily nodded again. When we were 6s, we went and shared a whole school day with a group of 6s in their community. Well, how did you feel when you were there? And Lily frowned. I felt strange because their methods were different. They were learning usages that my group hadn't learned yet, so we felt stupid. And Father was listening with interest. I'm thinking, Lily, he said, about the boy who didn't obey the rules today. Do you think it's possible that he felt strange and stupid, being in a new place with rules that he didn't know about? Lily pondered that. Yes, she said finally. Pondered means she thought about it. I feel a little sorry for him, Jonas said. Even though I don't even know him, I feel sorry for anyone who is in a place who feels strange and stupid. Well, how do you feel now, Lily? Father asked. Still angry? I guess not, Lily decided. I guess I feel a little sorry for him. And sorry, I made a fist. And she grinned. So, if I want to think about drawing conclusions here, I can draw the conclusion that there probably aren't any animals in this particular community. And I can draw this conclusion because when the kids call each other animals, they really don't know what an animal is. If we go back to page 7, because I'm looking for my textual evidence here, it says in the middle of page 7, like animals, neither child knew what the word meant exactly, but it was often used to describe someone uneducated or clumsy, someone who didn't fit in. So that textual evidence is leading me to believe, or leading me to draw a conclusion, that where they live, animals are not part of the equation, and it's not part of their life there. That would be like me living in Corbin and never leaving Corbin, and there's no cats, there's no dogs, there's no animals whatsoever here. So I would have no real recollection of what those are. And that's kind of where we're going with that on that particular drawing conclusion. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take just a moment and I want you to break down your own questions. This is something you've been doing for 1.5 years with me. So I want you to break them down, and then we're going to talk about them very quickly, and then we're going to move back into our story. So I'm going to watch the clock. You've got about a minute to break them down, and then we'll go on. You've got about 20 more seconds. All right, so here we go. Number 1 says, which of the following best shows that this is a science fiction story? And so I want you to, if you haven't already, drawn a line or an arrow above science fiction. And I want you to write that science fiction is things that are not normal to our lifestyle. So it would be unusual for us to have robots in our home. That would be an example of science fiction to me. An example of science fiction would be us not knowing what animals are. So when we think about science fiction, I want you to draw that arrow and write something that is unusual for us. I'm paraphrasing. And you know you're only going to choose one answer. And remember that it's always good to eliminate the answers that you know it cannot be. Okay, so keep that in mind. Number 2, I want you to describe Jonas. What do you know about him so far? And what I will tell you is Jonas is going to be our main character throughout this whole story. And so as we finish reading to page 19 today, I want you to make yourself some notes on the side of your team talk about what are we learning about Jonas. Number 3, in 1 or 2 sentences, summarize how families come together in the community. So we know that a summary is in your own words. So they're wanting you to do the reading or listen to the reading, and then in your own words, explain to me how families come together. And number 4, on a test, number 4 would be a 30-point question. It'd be 10 points for the multiple choice. And then at the bottom, look where D is. Underneath that, it says what evidence from the story supports this conclusion. So I want you to put a star there or write 4B, because that's telling you that you have to answer both pieces of that. So number 4 reads, which of the following conclusions can you draw after reading this part of the story? You're going to choose one, and then you're going to tell me or give me your evidence that supports the conclusion that you've drawn. So when we do questions tomorrow, you are going to be required to write all 4 questions in your journal. So you're going to write all 4 in your journal, and then tomorrow's upload, I will be telling you which ones that I want you to put on your Google Classroom, excuse me. And then that way I'll be able to see those when I log in on my end. At the end of our lesson today, I'll talk a little bit more about that Google Classroom, and as well as tomorrow at the beginning of the feed. So we'll discuss that a little bit more in depth. But I do want you to go ahead and circle number 4. Number 4 is our end in mind question, and we will always put that on Google Classroom. So circle that, and then I will let you know which other 1 or 2 that you'll also be uploading as well. Now, at this point, you have a choice. You can kind of fast forward the video until the readings are done to hear the end of the reading instructions, or you can still stay tuned in and I'm going to read. We will be reading to the very top of page 19. So we have about 9 more pages to go through today, and that's what we're going to do. I'm really sorry that I didn't give you all sticky notes before school was out on Friday. So what I'd like you to do as I'm reading though, or as you're reading, make yourself notes on your team talk as we come to an answer or something that you think would be textual evidence. Write it on your team talk. So when it's time to go back and do your questions, you may not have a sticky note, but you do at least have an idea of where to go. All right? Okay, here we go. Bottom of 8. Well, Jonas smiled back at his sister. Lily's feelings were always straightforward, fairly simple, usually easy to resolve. He guessed that his own had been too when he was a 7. He listened politely, though not very attentively, while his father took his turn, describing a feeling of worry that he had had that day at work, a concern about one of the new children who wasn't doing well. Jonas's father's title was nurturer. He and the other nurturers were responsible for all the physical and emotional needs of every new child during its earliest life. It was a very important job, Jonas knew, but it wasn't one that interested him much. "What gender is it?" Lily asked. "Male," Father said. "He's a sweet little male with a lovely disposition, but he isn't growing as fast as he should, and he doesn't sleep soundly. We have him in the extra care section for supplementary nurturing, but the committee's beginning to talk about releasing him So there's that supplementary. So the little male is requiring additional nurturing or additional care. "Oh no," Mother murmured sympathetically. "I know how sad that must make you feel." Well, Jonas and Lily both nodded sympathetically as well. Release of new children was always sad because they hadn't had a chance to enjoy life within the community yet, and they hadn't done anything wrong. There were only 2 occasions of release which were not punishment. Release of the elderly, which was a time of celebration for a life well and fully lived, and release of a new child, which always brought a sense of what could we have done. This was especially troubling for the nurturers like Father, who felt they had failed somehow, but it happened very rarely. "Well," Father said, "I'm going to keep trying. I must ask the committee for permission to bring him here at night, if you don't mind. You know what the night crew nurturers are like. I think this little guy needs something extra." "Well, of course," Mother said. And Jonas and Lily nodded. They had heard Father complain about the night crew before. It was a lesser job, night crew nurturing, assigned to those who lacked the interest or skill or insight for the more vital jobs of the daytime hours. Most of the people on the night crew had not even been given spouses because they lacked, somehow, the essential capacity to connect to others, which was required for the creation of a family unit. "Maybe we could even keep him," Lily suggested sweetly, trying to look innocent. The look was fake, Jonas knew, and they all knew. "Lily," Mother reminded her, smiling, "you know the rules. 2 children, 1 male, 1 female to each family unit. It was written very clearly in the rules." And Lily giggled. "Well," she said, "I thought maybe just this once." Well, next, Mother, who held a prominent position at the Department of Justice, talked about her feelings. Today, a repeat offender had been brought before her, someone who had broken the rules before. Someone who had hoped had been adequately, someone who she had hoped had been adequately and fairly punished, and who had been restored to his place, to his job, his home, his family unit. To see him brought before a second time caused her overwhelming feelings of frustration and anger, and even guilt, that she hadn't made a difference in his life. "I feel frightened too for him," she confessed. "You know that there's no third chance. The rules say that if there's a third transgression, he simply has to be released." And Jonas shivered. He knew it happened. There was even a boy in his group of 11s whose father had been released years before. No one ever mentioned it. The disgrace was unspeakable. It was hard to imagine. Well, Lily stood up and went to her mother, and she stroked her mother's arm. From his place at the table, Father reached over and took her hand, and Jonas reached for the other. And one by one they comforted her, and soon she smiled and thanked them and murmured that she felt soothed. The ritual continued. "Jonas," Father asked, "you're last tonight." And Jonas sighed. This evening he almost would have preferred to keep his feelings hidden, but it was, of course, against the rules. "I'm feeling apprehensive," he confessed, glad that the appropriate descriptive word had finally come to him. "Why is that, son?" His father looked concerned. "I know there's really nothing to worry about," Jonas explained, "and that every adult has been through it. I know you have, Father, and you too, Mother. But it's the ceremony that I'm apprehensive about. It's almost December." And Lily looked up, her eyes wide. "The ceremony of 12? She whispered in an awed voice. Even the smallest children, Lily's age and younger, knew that it lay in the future for each of them. "I'm glad you told us of your feelings," Father said. "Lily," Mother said, beckoning to the little girl, "come on now and get into your night clothes. Father and I are going to stay here and talk to Jonas for a while." And Lily sighed, but obediently she got down from her chair. "Privately?" she asked. And Mother nodded. "Yes," she said. "This talk will be a private one with Jonas." I'm going to stop here at the end of chapter 1, allowing you a few moments to see about where is the evidence that supports some of your answers here. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes and then we'll continue. And I'm going to do the same. Got about 1 more minute. All right, we have just a few more pages to read. Chapter 2. Jonas watched as his father poured a fresh cup of coffee, and he waited. "You know," his father finally said, "every December was exciting to me when I was young, and it has been for you and Lily too, I'm sure. Each December brings such change." Jonas nodded. He could remember the Decembers back to when he had become, well, probably a 4. The earlier ones were lost to him, but he observed them each year and he remembered Lily's earliest Decembers. He remembered when his family received Lily, the day she was named, the day that she had become a 1. The ceremony for the 1s was always noisy and fun. Each December, all the new children born in the previous year turned 1, and one at a time. There were always 50 in each year's group. If none had been released, they had been brought to the stage by the nurturers who cared for them since birth. Some were already walking wobbly on their unsteady legs, and others were no more than a few days old, wrapped in blankets, held by their nurturers. "I enjoy the naming," Jonas said. And his mother agreed, smiling. The year we got Lily, we knew, of course, that we'd receive our female because we'd made our application and been approved. But I'd been wondering what her name would be. "I could have sneaked a look at the list prior to the ceremony," Father confided. "The committee always makes the list in advance, and it's right there in the office at the nurturing center. As a matter of fact," he went on, "I feel a little guilty about this, but I did go in this afternoon and look to see if this year's naming list had been made yet. It was right there in the office, and I looked up number 36. That's the little guy I've been concerned about, because it occurred to me that it might enhance his nurturing if I could call him by name, just privately, of course, when no one else is around." "Well, did you find it?" Jonas asked. He was fascinated. It didn't seem a terribly important rule, but the fact that his father had broken a rule at all awed him. He glanced at his mother, the one responsible for adhering to the rules, and was relieved She was smiling. His father nodded. His name, if he makes it to the naming without being released, of course, is to be Gabriel. So I whispered that to him when I fed him every 4 hours and during exercise and playtime, if no one can hear me. I call him Gabe, actually, he said and grinned. Gabe, Jonas tried it out. A good name, he decided. Though Jonas had only become a 5 the year that they acquired Lily and learned her name, he remembered the excitement, the conversation at home, wondering about her, how she would look, who she would be, how she would fit into their established family unit. And he remembered climbing the steps to the stage with his parents, his father by his side that year instead of with the nurturers, since it was the year that he would be given a new child of his own. He remembered his mother taking the new child, his sister, into her arms while the document was read to the assembled family unit. New child 23, the namer had read, Lily. He remembered his father's look of delight and that his father had whispered, she's one of my favorites. I was hoping for her to be the one. And the crowd had clapped and Jonas had grinned. He liked his sister's name. Lily, barely awake, had waved her small fist, and then they had stepped down to make room for the next family unit. When I was 11, his father said now, as you are, Jonas, I was very impatient, waiting for the ceremony of 12. It's a long 2 days, and I remember that I enjoyed the ones, as I always do, but that I didn't pay much attention to the other ceremonies, except for my sister's. She became a 9 that year and got her bicycle. I'd been teaching her to ride mine, even though technically I wasn't supposed to. And Jonas laughed. It was one of the few rules that was not taken very seriously and was almost always broken. The children all received their bicycles at 9, and they were not allowed to ride bicycles before then. But almost always, the older brothers and sisters had secretly taught the younger ones, and Jonas had been thinking about already teaching Lily. There was talk about changing the rule and giving the bicycle at an earlier age. A committee was studying the idea. When something went to a committee for study, the people always joked about it. They said that the committee members would become elders by the time the rule change was made. Rules were very hard to change. Sometimes, if it was a very important rule, unlike the one governing the age for bicycles, it would have to go eventually to the receiver for a decision. The receiver was the most important elder. Jonas had never seen him, but he knew of. Someone in a position of such importance lived and worked alone. But the committee would never bother the receiver with a question about bicycles. They would simply fret and argue about it themselves for years, until the citizens forgot that it had ever gone to them for study. And his father continued. So I watched and cheered when my sister Katie became a 9 and removed her hair ribbons and got her bicycle. And father went on. Then I didn't pay much attention to the 10s and 11s. And finally, at the end of the second day, which seemed to go on forever, it was my turn. It was the ceremony of 12. And Jonas shivered. He pictured his father, who must have been a shy and quiet boy, for he was a shy and quiet man, seated with his group, waiting to be called to the stage. The ceremony of the 12 was the last of the ceremonies, the most important. I remember how proud my parents looked, and my sister too. Even though she wanted to be out riding a bicycle publicly, she stopped fidgeting and was very still and attentive when my turn came. But to be honest, Jonas, his father said, for me, there was not the element of suspense that there is with your ceremony, because I was already fairly certain of what my assignment was to be. So that's where we stop reading for today. I'd like you once again to take a moment and see where the page numbers is, as well as the paragraphs are that are going to help you answer your questions for tomorrow. So take about 2 minutes. I made my notes. All right, so this is where we stop for today. And so tune in tomorrow. We know without a shadow of a doubt you have to write number 4. You've got to write all 4 of them, but number 4 is one without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to be uploading to Google Classroom. So I'm going to talk about Google Classroom very briefly. When you tune in tomorrow, I will give you a Google Classroom code. Then I will give you at least 2 questions that you need to upload. Those questions I will score using the rubric that we use in class, and I hope some of you brought your rubrics home. And that's how I'm going to be giving you daily grades through this process, just like I do when I'm drawing sticks for Random Recorder. Those scores I write on my clipboard, and so I'm going to be looking at those, doing those daily scores from that. So keep that in mind, guys. If you don't want zeros, you've got to upload those to Google Classroom, or contact me and I'll give you an alternate way to get those to me. You can log into the 5th and 6th grade Facebook page and message me that way if you are struggling. You can send an email to my work email, kimberly.dunn@knox.kyschools.us. And or you can call my cell phone. But what I will tell you is you'll have to leave a message, because if I don't recognize your number, I won't necessarily pick up. Or you can send me a text at 344-6147. So for right now, that's the end of our lesson. Let me go over here and turn us off.